The setting up of a mission for manuscripts by the Government of India is the culmination of several efforts starting from the 19th century to document and protect the precious manuscript wealth of our country. Given the complexity of attempting to protect India's millions of manuscripts spread over in several languages and several scripts across the country and abroad, the task seemed formidable in 2002 as we looked towards future. And the National Mission for Manuscript was established on 7 February 2003 by the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, in order to document, conserve, digitize the manuscripts, India's treasure trove of knowledge, as well as to disseminate the knowledge contained therein. For wider outreach, the mission organizes lectures, seminars, and workshops for students and interested persons. Tattvada Lecture is one of such outreach programs where eminent scholars deliver lectures on topics related to Indology. And these lectures are published under Tattvada series. Topic of today's Tattvada lecture is the relevance of Buddhist literature today with reference to Pali literature. As we all know, Buddhism today is not only the part and parcel of the rich Indian culture, but also becoming a part of global culture because of its universal and secular teachings. The original teachings of the Buddha was in Pali, which was the lingua franca of the northern India, where Lord Buddha lived in the 6th century BC. The Pali literature, besides the teachings of the Buddha, contains the invaluable treasure of Indian civilization, including the historical, geographical, socio-political, and cultural conditions of that time. Professor Dr. Rabindra Pant, the well-known scholar on Buddhist studies, is the speaker of Tattvada lecture today. And the chairperson of today's program, another stalwart of Buddhist studies, is Professor Dr. Kuldeep Chand Agnihotri. Professor Dr. Rabindra Pant, MA on Buddhist Studies, Gold Medalist, University of Delhi, was the Director, Vice Chancellor of Navanalanda Mahavihara, where he served from 2000 to 2016. At present, he is the executive member of the Association of Theravada Buddhist Universities, Bangkok, Thailand. He is the member and board of director of Light of Buddha Dharma Foundation International, India. He is the Chief Advisor, Association of Buddhist Tourism Operator, Nalanda, Bihar. Professor Pant has more than 100 research papers to his credit, published more than 20 books. He also started the monumental project of compilation, edition, and publication of Pali Hindi dictionary for the first time in India. And till date, 5 volumes have been published. In the field of cultural preservation and dissemination of Buddhist studies, Professor Pant's contribution is enormous. Due to his achievements in the field of Buddhist studies, Government of the Union of Myanmar has conferred the prestigious title of Mahasadharma Jatikadhaja in 2008. He was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award at the International Festival of Buddhist Heritage of Ladakh, August 2014. In November 2014, he was awarded Buddhism Today Award for Leadership Excellence in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. In 2015, Professor Pant was presented the 5th Modernites Conclave and Excellence Awards for sterling achievements and bringing glory in the field of education. Today's chairperson, Professor Dr. Kuldeep Chand Agnihotri, another well-known scholar, joined the Central University of Himachal Pradesh as Vice Chancellor on 20th April 2015. Before joining this university, he was serving in Punjab School Education Board as its vice chairman. Professor Agnihatri has been in the field of academics for around 4 decades. During this period, he has served with Himachal Pradesh University in various capacities. He was chairman of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Chair in Himachal Pradesh University for quite some time, a regular columnist in many regional and national newspapers. He has more than 18 books to his credit. Now, I hand over the session to the chairperson, Professor Kuldeep Chand Agnihatri, sir.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद डॉक्टर संघमित्रा जी। भाई सबसे पहले तो मैं IGNCA के सदस्य सचिव श्री सच्चिदानंद जोशी जी और जो नेशनल मिशन फॉर मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स के डायरेक्टर हैं प्रोफेसर प्रताप आनंद झा जी, और संघमित्रा जी का मैंने पहले नाम लिया ही है, और संघमित्रा जी इस मिशन की जो प्रकाशन का काम है उसके कोऑर्डिनेटर हैं, समन्वयक हैं। और अभी मैं देख रहा था अभिजीत दीक्षित जी भी काफी परिश्रम करके सबको जोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहे थे। आप सब मित्रों को मैं बहुत बधाई देना चाहता हूं कि बहुत ही बड़े अच्छे विषय पर और इस व्याख्यान का आयोजन किया है। डॉक्टर रविंद्र पंत जी का परिचय संघमित्रा जी ने बहुत विस्तार से करवाया और मुझे दोबारा करवाने की जरूरत नहीं है। रविंद्र जी की विद्वत्ता की तूती पूरे दक्षिण पूर्व एशिया में बोलती है। भारत में तो है ही, उनका जो पुण्य प्रताप है भारत में तो है ही, लेकिन पूरे दक्षिण पूर्व एशिया में, जैसे अभी संघमित्रा जी ने बताया अभी कि थाईलैंड में और म्यांमार में उनकी सरकारों ने उनको सम्मानित भी किया है। रविंद्र पंत जी पाली साहित्य के प्रकांड पंडित हैं और आज का जो विषय भी है वो यही है कि वर्तमान संदर्भ में पाली साहित्य के संदर्भ में बौद्ध साहित्य की प्रासंगिकता आधुनिक युग में क्या हो सकती है। इस विषय पर रविंद्र जी को मैं निवेदन करूंगा कि वो अपना व्याख्यान दें ताकि सभी उससे लाभान्वित हो सकें। डॉक्टर रविंद्र जी, नमस्कार।
धन्यवाद। नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। Honorable Chairperson, Professor Kuldeep Chand Agnihotri ji, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Himachal Pradesh, Moderator of the session, Sanghamitra Basu ji, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. It is indeed a moment of joy to participate in this online Tattva Bodh lecture series of National Mission for Manuscript of IGNCA, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. I am thankful to the organizers for giving me opportunity to speak on the topic relevance of Buddhist literature today with reference to Pali literature. Although it is very difficult for me to do justice with the topic in such a short time, so I will concentrate more on the original words of the Buddha, which is in Pali, discussing few important discourses of Buddha highlighting its relevance today. I think I am audible.
Yes.
As we all know, Buddhism today is not only part and parcel of rich Indian culture, but also becoming part of the global culture because of its universal and secular teachings, much needed in today's chaotic world to sustain the society. Buddhism is basically a way of life. The present era of scientific and technological advancement has resulted into the so-called material advancement. However, this scientific and technological advancement has failed to alleviate the basic suffering like poverty, inequality, communalism, etc., that very much provides the fertile ground for the growth of fundamentalism, violence, and conflict throughout the world. There is no empirical evidence to support the assumption that social and economic progress based on the materialistic concept of life can ensure happiness and well-being of the humanity. Moreover, the present crisis of COVID pandemic has created an environment of fear and uncertainty of life. In such a conflicting scenario, to bring peace, happiness, harmony within us and in the environment around us, attention must shift to issues that help in making human a humane. It is this that makes Buddhist literature, and more so the Pali literature, relevant as it encompasses the philosophy of life missing in the post-modern era of development. Friends, 6th century BC was an important landmark in the history of human civilization around the world. During this time, ancient Greece, Israel, China, and even India witnessed the ultimate care awakening. Great masters emerged during this period, and in India, it was Shakyamuni Buddha who devoted all his life for Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, Lokanukampaya, for the welfare of benefit of the people, for the happiness of people, of mankind, out of compassion for the suffering people. The Buddha, after getting enlightenment at the age of 35 at Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree, he became fully liberated from the circles of life and death, totally purifying his mind. For 45 years, he did his charika, sublime wandering, preaching people the technique of how to come out of suffering in this world. At the age of 80, he passed away in Kushinagar. Soon after his Mahaparinibbana, his great demise, his sublime discourses that he gave were compiled in the first Dhamma congregation, which took place in Rajgraha just after his demise. This Rajgraha was the capital of the powerful Magadhan Empire, and the words of the Buddha were collected and were popularly known as Tipitaka and are in Pali language, which is the lingua franca of the time. I will discuss the detail about this later on, as this is my main topic. Before that, I would like to tell you that as the time passed, a large number of people got benefited with the teachings of the Buddha and the practice of Dhamma preached by the Buddha. People from all walks of life, men and women, young and old, rich and poor, traders, farmers, king and commoners of various caste, creed were attracted towards the teaching of the Buddha. During the 3rd century BC, Emperor Ashoka, getting benefited from the teachings of the Buddha in his personal life and also in his governance to the country, shared the Dhamma with the neighboring states, and soon the secular teaching of the Buddha spread peacefully across the Indian subcontinent, and from there far and wide throughout Asia. We have the evidence that Ashoka promoted the Dhamma even by inscribing teachings of the Buddha through pillar inscription, rock edicts, etc. Wherever the teachings of the Buddha reached a new culture, the Buddhist method and styles were freely modified to fit the local mentality without compromising the essential points of wisdom and compassion. Buddhism never developed an overall hierarchy of religious authority with a supreme head. Instead, each country to which it spread developed its own forms in its own cultural, structural, and its own spiritual head. Buddha's teaching spread far over the centuries, first to Southeast Asia, then through Central Asia to China and to the rest of the East Asia, and finally to Tibet and further reaches of Central Asia. Often it developed in these regions organically because of the people's interest in foreign merchants of Buddhist belief. Sometimes rulers adopted Buddhism to help bring ethics to their people, but no one was forced to convert. By making Buddha's words and his message available to the public, people were free to choose what was helpful in their daily life. With this, we see the rise of Buddhism as Sri Lankan Buddhism, Myanmar Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Cambodian Buddhism, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, and Tibetan Buddhism, etc. As a result, the Buddhist literature started developing in their own language. Within coming centuries, a vast literature, Buddhist literature compiled besides the Pali and Sanskrit. A lot of Buddhist literature is available in Sinhalese, Burmese, Thai, Siamese, Khmer, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, Tibetan, etc., and is available today and is the guiding force to those countries that still follow the middle path of the Buddha. Unfortunately, the Buddha and his sublime teachings were forgotten in the land of its origin, or we can say got assimilated in the culture of India. Having discussed in brief about the development of Buddhist literature, I will now discuss about the origin of Pali literature followed by its relevance today. As I have already mentioned earlier, more than 25 centuries ago, Pali was the colloquial language of the part of the northern India from where Gautam the Buddha lived. From the time Gautam became the Buddha until the time of his passing away, which is called Mahaparinibbana, he gave thousands of sublime discourses for the benefit and happiness of people. Within 3 months of Buddha's great demise, the first Dhamma Sangiti, the first congregation or the council, was convened at Rajgriha with the purpose of collecting, reciting, and classifying the words of the Buddha in an oral tradition in order to preserve them in their pristine purity. These words of the Buddha are presently known as Tipitaka. Ti means 3, Pitaka in Pali means baskets. So the entire words of the Buddha comes under Tipitaka. And what are these 3 baskets? The first is the basket of Vinaya Pitaka, which contains the rules of conduct pertaining to monks and nuns. The second is the Sutta Pitaka, which contains the popular discourses given by the Buddha with apt illustrations, similes, metaphors throughout his life. And the third is the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which contains the profound teaching of the Buddha related to the ultimate reality, which elucidate the functioning and interrelationship between mind, mental factors, matter, and the phenomena transcending these. It is an amalgamation of psychology and ethics in the true sense. To keep the purity of the words of the Buddha, there has been a tradition of convening the Buddha Dhamma Sangiti, the congregation. As I said earlier, the first council was held in Rajgriha, where the words were collected and compiled. The second council took place 100 years after in Vaishali. The third was convened during the time of King Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. It was the 4th council, which was held in Sri Lanka, that for the first time the teachings of the Buddha were committed to writing. That was in the between 1st century BC and 1st century AD. The 5th and the 6th councils were held in Myanmar. The 6th council was the last Sangiti, Dhamma Sangiti, where the words of the Buddha were again recited. This took place between 1954 to 56. It was in the year 1956 that 2,500 years of Mahaparinirvana was celebrated throughout the world and in the Buddhist countries. In this way, we see for centuries across contents, the Pali literature was carefully transmitted, recorded in various forms of manuscripts until they began to be printed in book form in late 19th century. In the subsequent time, in addition to the Pali Tipitaka, which contains the original words of the Buddha, enormous amount of commentaries, Attakathas, sub-commentaries, tikas, and further sub-commentaries have been written down by great commentators since the ancient time, which were all added, and thereby making a valuable contribution to the ancient Pali literature and tradition. The tradition of compiling commentaries in Pali still continues today in countries like Myanmar and Sri Lanka. Friends, not only does the Pali literature contains the invaluable treasure of Indian civilization, including culture, religion, and philosophy, but it also contains the great contribution of the unique message of the Buddha, which emphasizes the importance of human values found in the practice of Sila, Samadhi, and Pragya, morality, concentration, and wisdom that lead to the liberation of each individual as to create harmony within the society, which is currently the most basic need of today's chaotic world. Due to paucity of time, I will only discuss a couple of important discourses of the Buddha in brief to show its relevance in making our life happy, peaceful, harmonious in the present day environment for smooth wayfaring in the world today. I begin with a very first discourse of the Buddha known as Dhamma Chakra Pavattana Sutta, turning the wheel of Dhamma. This is the essence of the teachings of the Buddha. This discourse was delivered by Buddha in the Deer Park in Saranath near Varanasi. In his first sermon, the Buddha emphasizes that I teach only two things, that there is suffering and there is the cessation of suffering. The sermon was given to his first 5 disciples on the full moon day of Asada, the 2 months after his enlightenment. The Buddha addressed the monks. Let me say a few words in Pali so that you can feel the language. He said, Dve me bhikkhave anta pabba jiten na sevitabba. Dve ime. These are the two extremes, ends, which a person who's treading in the path should not participate in. Katame dve, what are they? Yo chayang kamesu kama sukhallikanu yogo hino gammo pothujjaniko anaryo anatha sanghito. He says one extreme is the path of life of sensual desire, path of ease and luxury, which is not good, which a person who's treading in the path of spirituality should not indulge. And then he says, Yo chayang attakilamathanu yogo dukkho anaryo anatta sangito. And the other one is the path of self-torture, self-mortification. So these extremes should not be followed by a person. And then he says, Ete ko bhikkhave ubho ante anupagamma majjhima patipada tathagatena abhisambuddha chakhu karani yana karani upasamaya abhinyaya sambodhaya nibbanaya samvartati. He says that avoiding these two extremes is the middle path, which the Buddha has experienced himself, and it is this middle path which produces vision, which produces knowledge, which leads to appeasement, direct knowledge, self-awakening, and unbinding or enlightenment. Saying so, Buddha further says, what is this middle path which the Tathagata, the Buddha, has experienced? And this is nothing but Aryo Attangiko Maggo. This is nothing but the eightfold path. And then he talks about these eightfold path, which is in Pali, and I'll give a Pali version and the English translation, is Samma Ditti, right understanding, Samma Sankappo, right resolve, Samma Vacha, right speech, Samma Kammanta, right conduct, Samma Ajiva, right livelihood, Samma Vayama, right effort, Samma Sati, right mindfulness, and Samma Samadhi, right concentration. So these eightfold path we find also mentioned in 3 categories as Shila, Samadhi, and Pragya. Friends, it was in this discourse that the Buddha further explained the 4 noble truths, that there is suffering, dukkhang arya satchang, there is a cause of suffering, samudayang arya satchang, there is cessation of suffering, nirodhang, dukkha nirodhang arya satchang, and there is the path leading to the cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodha gamini patipada arya satchang. This Buddha gives as a formula for identification, diagnosis, prescription and eradication of the most fundamental disease, that is suffering. In Pali, dukkha. The above referred discourse has great relevance in presenting a well-developed research methodology and scientific investigation today. Moreover, what can be seen in Pali Buddhist literature is not so much the theories or the propositions, but a methodology and approach without static notions of dogmas. The teachings of the Buddha are all result-oriented. Let us evaluate this. The Four Noble Truths, as discussed in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first sermon of the Buddha, constitute a framework of research, designing, investigation, and particularly problem solving. Dukkha as problem identification, samudaya as causal investigation, nirodha as possible or required solution, and magga as recommendations or the pathways for the desired solutions. Like a scientist, the main problem before the Buddha was to understand dukkha, universal suffering, human suffering. To find magga, means to overcome the suffering. The methodology that he used in this endeavor at that time was the Four Noble Truths, which is even today quite exemplary in any research. Today, it is obvious that research is an activity, and a human activity for the matter, and for that it is increasingly clear that many lessons could be drawn from the Buddha's teaching for research and research methodology. The Four Noble Truths can considered to be as the very foundation of the Buddhist philosophy. It is apparently the first teaching of the Buddha which appears in this discourse. In the strict interpretation, the Four Noble Truths, there cannot be any doubt that primary aim was to explain how to achieve cessation of suffering or emancipation. As the Buddha was addressing many existential, social, and environmental issues of the people of that time after the attaining of the enlightenment or delivering the first teaching, it is possible to assume that he applied or used the same methodology to interpret several other issues and problems. So we can say that the Four Noble Truths is primarily about knowledge and knowledge acquisition. That was also the primary purpose of Buddha's research. In the sutta, in the discourse, the value of middle path was emphasized as leading to calm, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening. This is of paramount importance to today's research. Avoiding both the two extremes, the middle path was realized by the Buddha, which producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to calm, direct knowledge, to self-awakening, and to unbinding or enlightenment. It is important to emphasize the key phrases: producing vision, producing knowledge, and direct knowledge, if not self-awakening or unbinding. Even one can argue that a kind of middle path is crucially important for a present-day researcher when particularly researching even controversial matters. The merit of the Four Noble Truths for research methodology is that it supplies a viable framework of methodology for scientific investigation, although not elaborated for obvious reasons of that time. The Buddha's system of Four Noble Truths has a clear design on how an investigation on a particular phenomena could proceed, especially investigating causes, samudaya, identifying solution, nirodha, and developing path for the solution, magga. Any research lacking these elements could be considered unscientific according to the Buddha's theory of knowledge. We can say that the medicine that the Buddha prescribed for the suffering was the Eightfold Path, or the path of Shila, Samadhi, and Pragya. the practical aspect of this Shila, Samadhi and Pragya is the Vipassana meditation clearly revealed by the Buddha in Mahasatipatthana Sutta, or the discourse on mindfulness, fourfold mindfulness. It is a discourse on insight and mindfulness. Friends, this is Vipassana is the practical aspect of the first discourse of the Buddha. Let me discuss in brief about the meaning of Vipassana or insight meditation and its relevance. The word Vipassana is a Pali term which has a distinct meaning. Etymologically, the term is derived from the word passa, which in Pali means to see, in Sanskrit pasha, which means to see, with vi as a prefix, which means visesena, with a special manner, or vividhena, with a different angles, vichayena, by disintegrating it. Thus, in Pali literature, we do find expressions as panyating thapetva visesena passati ti vipassana. Vipassana is observation of reality in a special way, in the correct way, by disintegrating the apparent truth. Vipassana, thus Vipassana means to see things as it is and not as it appears. Vipassana is best rendered in English as insight. Therefore, Vipassana can best be rendered in English as insight, to see things as they really are, in their true perspective, in their true nature. It is, in true sense, a practical technique of self-examination, a scientific method of self-observation that results in the total purification of mental impurities and the realization of the highest happiness and full liberation. In today's chaotic world, we find the vibrations of negativity, anger, ill will, animosity, hatred, ego, etc. in the atmosphere around us. Thus, pollution, although invisible, causes so much of distress and problems in human society. Likewise, tension, stress, conflict, several types of psychosomatic disorders comes up. This results in nothing but misery. Vipassana, practice of Vipassana, is the way that takes us out of suffering. In true sense, a technique to purify the mind. With a pure mind, one is able to easily overcome the darkness of ignorance and negativity. It brings total well-being to the person who practices it and provides a secure, happy, peaceful, and harmonious living. Friends, the best advantage in the practice of Vipassana meditation is that one finds that even before the eradication of the ultimate suffering, one experiences many benefits. One learns how not to react to the symptoms of suffering, which include the physical and mental discomfort of mundane world amongst the human beings. These discomforts are the main source of suffering, creating psychic and psychosomatic disorder in the present day society, thereby curtailing our human performance. In this way, we see that the Pali literature is an unparalleled lexicon of wisdom. It not only gives ancient spiritual philosophical landscape of India of the 25 centuries ago, but it provides a way by which even now, if we apply these things in our life, can bring happiness to us and makes us peaceful, calm, which is very much needed. Friends, before I conclude my talk, I would like to take another very important discourse of the Pali literature, which is very relevant to us today. This discourse is called Kalama Sutta. Earlier, I have talked about the first discourse of the Buddha and its practical application, which is as part of the practice of Vipassana, and which is this particular discourse on Vipassana was given by the Buddha in Kurukshetra, Kuru area, and is called Mahasatipatthana Sutta. And now, after practicing, purifying, another very important aspect what Buddha talked was against dogmatism. This particular discourse, which is called Kalama Sutta, was against the practice of dogmatism. And here the Buddha as a practical thinker comes up. I quote this, I summarize this, the discourse. This particular discourse called Kalama Sutta comes in Anguttara Nikaya and shows us that the Buddha was not in support of any such dogmatism. The discourse is considered as a charter of free inquiry. The Buddha was opposed to blind faith, dogmatism, and belief spawned through spurious reasoning. The discourse was delivered to Kalama of Kesaputta, a community, while he was on a visit to that locality. When the people heard that the Buddha was in their own town, the Kalamas paid visit and questioned Buddha, and he told Buddha, I quote, "Sir, there are some recluses and brahmanas who visit Kesaputta. They explain and illumine only their own doctrines and despise, condemn, spurn, and other doctrines. Then comes another type of recluses and brahmanas, and they too, in their turn, explain and illumine their own doctrines and despise, condemn, and spurn others' doctrines. But for us, we have always doubt and perplexity as to who among these venerable recluses and brahmanas spoke the truth and who spoke falsehood." Then the Buddha gave them the advice which explicates his theory of knowledge and advocates very clearly the value of independent investigation and verification through personal observation. Friends, Buddha said, yes, Kalamas, it is proper that you have doubt, that you have perplexity, for a doubt has arisen in a matter of which is doubtful. Now, look, you Kalamas, do not be led by reports or traditions or hearsay. Do not led by the authority of religious texts, not by mere logic or inference, nor by considering appearances, nor by the delight in speculative opinions, nor by seeming possibilities, nor by the idea that this is our teacher. But, O Kalamas, when you know for yourself that certain things are unwholesome, akusala, and wrong and bad, then give them up. And when you know for yourself that certain things are wholesome, kusala, or good, then accept them and follow them. What is highlighted here is personal checking and verification according to the Buddha. Everything should be tested and verified before accepting on the basis of your own experience. Kalama Sutta appears to apply more for verifying existing knowledge and could be useful as a guideline for reviews or theoretical overviews in modern day research work. The basic lesson is not to take anything written or available on their face value, but to scrutinize thoroughly for verification based on your experience. The key to understanding these differences lies in a correct Buddhist interpretation of know for yourself, wholesome or unwholesome. When there's a great scholar, Mr. Venerable Walpole Rahula, he indicates that these concepts are the part of a specific and disciplined form of methodology of self-cultivation, which, when diligently practiced, leads to true knowledge and wisdom. This method is referred to in Buddhism as the three non-outflow sciences and consist of Sila, Samadhi, and Pragya, morality, concentration, and wisdom. Friends, in science, a theory should be tested in several ways before it can be accepted by the scientific community. The Buddha also recommended in the Kalama Sutta that any teaching and insight given by any teacher should be tested by your own experience before it can be accepted as the truth. Real insight or right understanding or right view has the capacity to liberate and to bring peace and happiness for individual and for the society. With this, I end my talk and I say Bhavatu Sabba Mangalang, may all of you be happy. Now, I would like to give the mic to the chairperson for his comments.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद डॉक्टर रविंद्र जी, बहुत अच्छा और बहुत ही थॉट प्रोवोकिंग जिसको कहा जा सकता है, डॉक्टर रविंद्र जी ने बहुत ही गहरी बातें, एक बात मैं जरूर ऐड तो नहीं, एक बात जरूर मैं उसमें, तथागत बुद्ध ने जो बातें कही हैं, रविंद्र जी तो उसके प्रकांड पंडित हैं और इन्होंने उसकी व्याख्या की है। कोई भी ज्ञान बिना आचरण के गड़बड़ करता है। बिना आचरण का ज्ञान अहंकार पैदा करता है और जब वो ज्ञान आचरण बनकर किसी व्यक्ति के भीतर उतर जाता है तो उसके पूरे लाइफस्टाइल को चेंज कर देता है। तथागत बुद्ध का जो ज्ञान था वो प्रैक्टिकली लोगों में, जिसको कहना चाहिए आचरण बनकर उतर गया, भारत के लोगों में तो खास करके, क्योंकि तथागत बुद्ध के उपदेश भारत से बाहर भी बहुत स्थानों पर गए, जैसे दक्षिण पूर्व एशिया का तो मैंने जिक्र किया ही, जापान तक गए, चीन तक गए, लेकिन इतना हुआ कि किसी की चमड़ी को छूते हुए निकल गए, किसी के भीतर चले गए और किसी के जीवन शैली का हिस्सा बन गए। बुद्ध के वचनों का सबसे बड़ा प्रभाव यही रहा। और एक बात जो तथागत बुद्ध ने कही, मैं समझता हूं उसका, जब उन्होंने कहा कि अप दीपो भव, अपना दीप खुद जलाओ, दूसरे के प्रकाश में यात्रा मत करो, हो सकता है वो रास्ता दूसरी ओर ले जाए। जैसे अभी रविंद्र जी ने कहा ना कि प्रमाण चाहिए, बिना प्रमाण के इन्वेस्टिगेशन, जिसको या साइंटिफिक इन्वेस्टिगेशन कह लीजिए, भगवान बुद्ध ने, तथागत बुद्ध ने कहा आप दीपो भाव। आनंद ने पूछा ना, अंत में वो कथा आती है कि अंत में भगवान आप चले जाएंगे तो रास्ता कौन दिखाएगा। तो तथागत बुद्ध एक क्षण के लिए मौन रहे। उनका आनंद, जाना तो सभी को है, कोई ऐसा तो नहीं है कि जीवन मतलब जो आया है वो जाएगा, इसमें कोई नई बात नहीं है, लेकिन मेरे जाने के प्रकाश काम रुके, मेरे जाने के बाद काम रुकेगा थोड़ा। आप दीपो भाव, अपना दीप खुद जलाओ। लेकिन एक मुझे लगता है जो गड़बड़ हो रही है, बहुत से तथागत बुद्ध ने जिन शब्दों का प्रयोग किया है उनमें से बहुत से शब्द कंसेप्ट शब्द है, जो एक अवधारणा है, कंसेप्ट है, उसका अनुवाद जब दूसरी भाषा में होता है, कई बार होता है अवधारणा का अनुवाद करना थोड़ा इतना आसान नहीं है, टेढ़ी खीर है। जो बुद्ध दर्शन में, जब भारतीय दर्शन में कहिए, जब भारतीय जीवन शैली में कहिए, क्योंकि मैं समझता हूं कि बुद्ध का जो रास्ता था, बुद्ध का जो दर्शन था, वो समग्र भारतीय दर्शन का ही प्रतीक था। भारतीय दर्शन को यदि इन टोटलिटी एक्सप्रेस करना हो तो आप उसको बुद्ध दर्शन में भी एक्सप्रेस कर सकते हैं। एक शब्द जो बार बार प्रयोग हुआ है, धर्म या धम्म, विदेशी भाषा में जब उसका ट्रांसलेशन हुआ तो रिलीजन हो गया। बस एक ट्रांसलेशन सब गड़बड़ कर दिए। तथागत बुद्ध जो धर्म का कंसेप्ट देते हैं वो रिलीजन का कंसेप्ट तो नहीं है, कम से कम। ये बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर ने, क्योंकि बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर भी जीवन के अंतिम दिनों में भगवान बुद्ध की शरण में चले गए थे और राहुल शंकराचार्य भी भगवान बुद्ध की शरण में चले गए थे। तो बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर ने जो बुद्ध और उसका धर्म जो अंत में किताब लिखी, उनके देहांत के कुछ महीने बाद छपी, उन्होंने इस बात का जिक्र किया हुआ है कि भाई सबसे बड़ी गड़बड़ जब हुई जब लोगों ने धर्म अथवा धम्म का अनुवाद रिलीजन कर दिया। रिलीजन बिल्कुल और कंसेप्ट है। अब कई बार जब हम भगवान बुद्ध के वचनों का उनको पढ़ते हैं, उनको समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो विदेशी भाषा में जो ट्रांसलेशन होता है बार बार रिलीजन आता है। अब रिलीजन और चीज है, धर्म और चीज है। मैं समझता हूँ तथागत बुद्ध की सबसे बड़ी खूबी ये थी कि उन्होंने लोक भाषा में लोक रास्ता आम लोगों के लिए और कैसा हो सकता है दुख दूर करने के लिए। देखिए दुनिया भर में जितने लोग काम करते हैं, जो भी परिश्रम करते हैं, इसीलिए करते हैं कि दुख ना हो। शायद जब से आदमी बना है जब तक रहेगा इसी रास्ते में और चला रहेगा कि दुख को कैसे दूर किया जाए, दुख को कैसे दूर किया जाए। तथागत बुद्ध ने भी उस रास्ते पर, लेकिन एक बात है, कुछ लोग दुख को कैसे दूर किया जाए इसको केवल ज्ञान के स्तर पर करते हैं। तथागत बुद्ध ने तो स्वयं यात्रा करके अपने अनुभव से जो निकला उसको दिया। देखिए अनुभव से जो चीज निकलती है वो ज्यादा प्रामाणिक होती है, क्योंकि वो अपने से भीतर से निकलती है। और नेचुरली वैसे भी हम प्रयोगशाला में प्रयोग करते हैं तो जो प्रयोग से रिजल्ट आता है वो ज्यादा प्रामाणिक होता है। तीसरा मुझे लगता है तथागत बुद्ध की जो उनका दर्शन था, उनका जो उपदेश थे, सारनाथ में अभी अरविंद जी ने जिक्र भी किया कि सारनाथ में उन्होंने वो हिरण पार्क में उपदेश दिया, जिसको आजकल की भाषा में हम कहते हैं कि लैब टू लैंड, कि प्रयोगशाला में जो ज्ञान निकलता है वो लैंड तक, नीचे तक जाना चाहिए। भगवान बुद्ध ने प्रयोगशाला में जो ज्ञान प्राप्त किया उसको नीचे जनता तक पहुंचा दिया। ये बहुत बड़ी खूबी है, क्योंकि यदि ज्ञान नीचे तक ना आए, संप्रेषित ना हो, जिनके लिए है उन तक ना पहुंचे, तो ज्ञान बहुत बड़ा बोझ बन जाता है, डुबो देता आदमी को। और जो स्वयं उस बोझ से मुक्त हो जाता है, नीचे संप्रेषित कर देता है, वो स्वयं भी तैरता है और दूसरों को भी तैराता है। तथागत बुद्ध ने जो किया वो स्वयं तो तैरे ही, निर्वाण प्राप्ति हुई, लेकिन आम जो जनता थी, खास करके मैं कहता हूं भारत के बारे में तो मैं खास कहना चाहूंगा, भारत की जीवन शैली में तथागत बुद्ध के उपदेश आत्मसात हो गए। जैसे पानी में वो क्या नाम, चीनी घुल जाती फिर दिखाई नहीं देती, तथागत बुद्ध ने जो कहा वो हमारे जीवन शैली का हिस्सा बन गया। इसलिए बहुत से लोगों, कई लोगों को दिखाई नहीं देता। वो कई बार पूछते रहते हैं कि बुद्ध मत गायब क्यों हो गया। मैं कई बार कहता हूँ गायब कहाँ हुआ, कहते चर्चा नहीं होती। चर्चा तब होगी वो मांस मज्जा का हिस्सा बन गया है, भारतीय जनमानस की मांस मज्जा का हिस्सा बन गया है, इसलिए दिखाई नहीं देता, वो आत्मसात हो गया है। नेशनल मिशन ऑफ मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स में बहुत भाई लाखों पांडुलिपियां पढ़ी हैं। मैं बहुत बार मित्रों को कहता रहता हूं कि ये भारतीय ज्ञान विज्ञान की अगाध परंपरा है, लेकिन दुर्भाग्य से कुछ का अनुवाद हो गया है, कुछ छप भी गई हैं, लेकिन इतनी बड़ी संख्या में पड़ी है कि सबका प्रकाशित होना भी जरूरी है। और उसका खास करके ऐसी पांडुलिपियां जो उन भाषाओं में हैं, जो भाषाएं आजकल प्रयोग में नहीं आती, उनका अनुवाद होना भी जरूरी है। जो ऐसी भाषाओं में है जो आजकल भी प्रयोग होती है, उनका अनुवाद चाहे ना भी हो तो वो छप ही जाए, इतने काफी है। जैसे संस्कृत की लाखों पांडुलिपियां हैं, उसमें भगवान बुद्ध के, तथागत बुद्ध के वचनों को, उनके कहों के पर भी लिखी गई हैं, वो केवल छप जाए, क्योंकि ये अभी संस्कृत भगवान की दया से जिंदा भाषा है। लेकिन कुछ भाषाएं ऐसी हैं जो सामान्य प्रयोग में नहीं होती, उनकी पांडुलिपियों को तो अनुवाद होना भी जरूरी है। तो आपका मिशन उस काम में लगा हुआ भाई, और इस प्रकार का व्याख्यान कराने की परंपरा है। मैं आपको एक बार फिर बधाई देता हूँ, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
चेयरमैन साहब की परमिशन से आप मेरी बात सुन सक रहे हैं?
हाँ हाँ बिल्कुल।
हाँ, आपकी परमिशन से मैं सर ये कहूंगा, जो आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा कि हम लोगों को एक गोष्ठी धर्म के ऊपर भी करनी चाहिए कि धम्म और धर्म ये क्या है। इसको जो रिलीजन से मिला दिया है वो बिल्कुल इसका मतलब ही बदल गया है। तो मैं चाहूंगा कि इस तरह की भी गोष्ठी हो। और जैसा आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा कि जब तक अनुभव से चीजें नहीं जानी जाए तो असली ज्ञान नहीं होता। बुद्ध ने जहां ज्ञान की बात आती है, उन्होंने 3 तरह की प्रज्ञा बताई है। पहली प्रज्ञा उन्होंने बताई है श्रुतमयी प्रज्ञा। श्रुतमयी प्रज्ञा मतलब जो ज्ञान सुना सुनाया ज्ञान हो। और दूसरा ज्ञान उन्होंने बताया है चिंतनमयी प्रज्ञा। दूसरा ज्ञान ऐसा जो कि हमने सुना और उसके बाद उसमें चिंतन किया, इंटेलेक्चुअल। मगर वो कहते हैं कि असली ज्ञान क्या है, वो है भावनामयी प्रज्ञा, जो भावित ज्ञान है, जो हमने अपने आत्मसात करा, अपने एक्सपीरियंस से जाना। तो इसीलिए उनका सारा जो कहा जाए कि स्ट्रेस रहता था, एम्फोसिस रहता था, वो इसी में रहता था कि अपने आप जानो, अपना अप दीपो भव की जो आपने बात करी ना, अपने आप जो तुम्हारा ज्ञान होगा वही सही ज्ञान होगा और वो आपको सही दिशा में ले जाएगा, सम्यक दृष्टि, राइट अंडरस्टैंडिंग प्रोवाइड करेगा। तो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद नेशनल मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट मिशन का भी, और अग्निहोत्री जी और संघमित्रा जी, बहुत अच्छा लगा, और आगे भी ऐसे गोष्ठी होगी तो बहुत अच्छा रहेगा। धन्यवाद।
It was a wonderful discourse. Two stalwarts of Buddhist literature in the platform. We are so grateful, sir. I, on behalf of National Mission for Manuscripts, express sincere thanks to the speaker, Professor Pant, for the insightful and informative lecture. Professor Pant has unveiled the relevance of Pali literature, which is a vast ocean overflowing with wholesome benediction of enlightened one, the Buddha, and especially on the explanation of Kalama Sutta. The mission wholeheartedly thanks to Professor Dr. Agnihatri, the chairperson, for having agreed to chair the session and for highlighting the aspects like the Buddhist discourses from some other angles. It is quite right, sir. Translation cannot express the original words, impregnate with the thought, with the original thought. Buddhist teaching unknowingly got mixed with the lives of Indian people. Thank you, sir. Both of you are stalwarts, and it's a very good platform. We are really, mission is really grateful to you.